everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. I hope you're doing well. Today we're going to be doing another episode of Read and Release, where I read through my entire physical TBR and try and unhaul as much of it as possible. So today we're going to be tackling 3 YA fantasy books, which have been on my TBR for a little while now, and yeah, just getting into them. So I used to love YA fantasy. I've been reading since I was very young, and I used to love fantasy, so it kind of goes hand in hand. But there's a few books that I had on my TBR then that I was super excited to read, and I've just kind of grown out of YA fantasy. I just find it a little bit repetitive now because I've read so much of it, and the characters are just a bit young for me, so I don't really relate as much. I'm kind of reading more adult fantasy, and as well I just haven't been reading as much fantasy, so these guys have been sticking around on my TBR. So today I thought we'd read these 3 to get them off my TBR and hopefully off my shelves. So let's get into it. So the first book I read was A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. This was actually not on my TBR. I picked this up, can you guess, at a library jumble sale. It's got a gorgeous cover, and it was like $1, and it sounded interesting. This is my, Achilles heel. I cannot resist these sales, but I banned myself for now because I kept buying books and then reading them instead of reading stuff that was already on my TBR. So I've stopped the problem, but now I'm having to work through the backlog that it caused. But anyway, so A Deadly Education is about a magical school in this really dangerous world, and the school is also really dangerous. It's kind of insane. But it has like a 50% survival rate, I think, but that is still way higher than being out in the real world. So it's like, you know, if you survive the school, then you're kind of okay to be out in the real world. But the school doesn't have any teachers or anything, or like really strict lessons, I guess. The school's kind of sentient, and yeah, it's a little bit confusing, to be honest, but yeah. So I thought this was like a Harry Potter retelling kind of deal, and it is definitely not. It's quite dark, but yeah, we are following this character who has come in. She is like not part of any of the big kind of like houses, I would guess, and she is trying to find her way through when this like superstar student, basically the Harry Potter of this world who just saves everyone, kind of starts saving her and following her, and then they kind of end up teaming up and trying to work through these issues that they're seeing. They're seeing more and more severe monsters coming up, and there should only be like little monsters, if it makes sense. So there's all these like creatures and stuff that they have to fight. I'm not sure if I explained that very well. It's been a little while since I read this, so I apologise, but yeah. I did not love this book. I gave it 3 stars. I do think a lot of my issues with this book were that I just went into it with the wrong expectations. I was definitely expecting kind of a Harry Potter vibe, and it was much darker. It reminded me a lot of Ninth House, actually, but even the school, it was just like grimy and like disgusting. There's like blood everywhere. There's drains in the rooms and stuff because so much like murdering of these creatures happens. It was just a bit icky, so I didn't love that. The world building also did not help. It was some of the worst world building I think I've ever seen in a fantasy book. It was just kind of thrown at you and almost felt overcomplicated for no reason, and I love a really kind of intricate magic system, but you have to set it up well, and you have to kind of do it almost organically, where we're not confused, but it doesn't feel like I've just been given a guide. And honestly, I would have preferred a guide to what happened here. It was just, I don't even know how to describe it. It was just thrown at you all at once and in a very confusing way. Like, it's like the author hadn't really thought through how to explain it. So she's like, oh, what about that? What about that? Basically how I explain these to you guys in videos, where I just kind of get distracted by my own train of thought and then have to jump back. Pretty much like that, which is why I don't write books. So Naomi needs to sort that out. Yeah. I did really love the Britishness of it, especially you see that throughout the main character Elle a lot. You can kind of really hear her voice, and she has these really fun little isms that are just so quintessentially English, so I love that. And her and Orion, who's like the Harry Potter character-ish guy, they're a really fun relationship. So he kind of comes from one of the main houses, so he doesn't really like need to speak to her or anything. She's kind of below him socially, but they're really fun. He's so focused on saving people that he's just not great with social, you know, interactions, and she doesn't really have time for him, but they kind of reluctantly form a friendship, and that was really fun to see. I always love seeing kind of awkward or recluse characters becoming friends, so that was fun. That said, yeah, overall, I just found this a little bit disappointing. I just thought as well, a lot of the magic system and a lot of the plot that was going on just seemed so plot device. Like, it was just, stuff was only happening to be resolved a couple of chapters later, or to, you know, I mean, I understand everything's a plot device, but it just, none of it seemed really well thought out or planned, and I don't like that. I like a fantasy that's really had that thought and planning put into it, where everything kind of feels organic and natural. It was also a bit of a slog to get through this. It took me a while. I kind of had to force myself, and while it was kind of interesting because I enjoyed their relationship, and I think the concept is really cool, but I just, yeah, I don't know. It was also just weird because everyone, like, they're talking about all these really powerful people, and then they've just kind of accepted that they send their kids to this school that has all these monsters in it, and they don't do anything about it, and no one's like, oh, we should probably sort this out. Didn't love that. But the magic system was pretty cool. I did enjoy that. It's like, if you, in order to like perform magic, the magic has to come from somewhere, so you have to like build up kind of almost credits of where that magic is pulling from. Otherwise it'll pull from people or objects, or you'll be like indebted and it could pull from yourself. So I thought that was a really interesting concept. I don't think I've read anything like that with that kind of magic system, so that was a lot of fun. But that was kind of the highlight. So yeah, overall I don't think the writing of this book or the kind of fantastical planning was well done enough for me, and I've just read too much fantasy and I just have high expectations, I guess, or higher expectations. The premise is really interesting, and I could definitely see a lot of people not being bothered as much by the writing because the premise is so interesting or because they really like the characters, but I also just, I didn't really like Ninth House. I don't really think I like this kind of dark fantasy like this, so I was just, it's not for me. I also think, by the way, that it's very kind of closed room because you're only at this school, but it's all like indoors and kind of grimy and dungeony, and I just was not about that. I think I've said many times, but I'm a settings girl. If the setting isn't right in a book, I just can't. I can't deal with it. I understand this is a big character flaw for me, but I just can't deal with it. So this book, yeah, definitely not my favourite. The next book I read was A Tale So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmerer, which is obviously from my physical TBR. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling which follows Harper, who is from Washington DC, who gets like abducted into this fantastical world where she meets Prince Ren, who is our Beast character, who has been cursed to repeat, I think it's like the same autumn or the same year, I can't remember how long the time is, but he has to get a woman to fall in love with him, but this is the last time he gets to do it. He's done it like 100 times or something, 300 times, and this is the final time before his curse, like the person who cursed him, is just gonna leave, like let time start continuing, and he'll be stuck as a beast forever. So the beast has also been kind of terrorizing the entire kingdom, and when he turns into the beast, does not remember anything. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Overall, it definitely did not have any crazy like twists on the story, I don't think, but I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought. So I am a big lover of A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J Maas. Not to be that person, but I like read it as it was coming out. I loved that when I was younger, so this has been on my TBR for ages. When I heard that this was like a similar book, if you liked The Court of Thorns and Roses, you'd like this. It definitely feels like kind of the B-Tech version. It's not as good as that, but it was really much more enjoyable than I thought, especially because I hate urban fantasy, and so when I started it and Harper was in Washington DC, I was like, okay, this has got about 2 more chapters before I DNF it, but she gets whisked away to a magical world, so we do, like, I really did hate the parts where she's in DC, but when she leaves, I was happy, and the kingdom was really nice. It was really well written, and it was a really nice kind of world that they built. The writing was very descriptive, but it's not like anything special, but you can picture it very well, and especially compared to A Deadly Education, it was quite a nice break and ability to get back into kind of whimsical high fantasy, if you will. Like, it was nice to read about. The setting was pretty. But yeah, Harper meets Prince Ren and his like sidekick Grey, and she kind of ends up helping them, trying to rebuild some stuff. She's, you know, the fierce girl. There's a lot of like the YA tropes in this where she's not like other girls, all that kind of stuff. But I do really love, Harper has cerebral palsy, and that was really interesting to see that represented in this book. I think they did a phenomenal job where it was acknowledged very like clearly, but it wasn't her defining feature by any means. She's like, yep, this is what I've got, let's go. And it was quite funny because obviously she's from this modern time, and then she goes back with these with the prince, and they're, you know, from ye olde kind of days, like it's a medieval fantasy setting, and they think she's like a warrior that's been injured, and they're like, oh, we can help you with your leg. She's like, no, it's just what it's like, because she's got a limp. But it was really interesting, and it was really cool to see her kind of falling into the more active lifestyle of like the medieval fantastical world, and being able to do all the same stuff. Like, she was, not that she wasn't she wasn't unfit before, but she's riding horses, she's doing archery, she's like, you know, out and about. There's no cars or public transport, you know, she's walking all the time, she's constantly active, and I think she starts training like sparring and stuff. So it was really cool getting to see her kind of build up her strength and her confidence within herself. I will say there was quite a bit of like mind over matter with that, which I don't know a lot about cerebral palsy, but for pretty much anything, that only works to a certain extent, and she'd be like, her leg wouldn't be working, or she'd be like dragging her leg along the ground because her leg was just, I don't know, not responding properly, and she'd be like, I just willed it to, it just needed to work because we needed to run away from this person, and then it would work. So that was a bit, I don't know if troubling's the right word, but it was just like, okay, you know, it was kind of, it was written in there until it was inconvenient for the story, and then they kind of had to just go, oh, mind over matter, we'll get over it. But overall I thought it was pretty well done, and it's one of the best kind of disability representations I've seen in books in a while, especially in a fantasy setting. It definitely is the classic like enemies to lovers in a Beauty and Beast retelling, which I do love, but it does happen very quickly, and I've been finding this a lot recently because I don't know, I am so picky about it now, and I don't know if it's because of A Court of Thorns and Roses, or if my expectations of that are just warped because I remember reading it and loving it then, and maybe my standards are higher now. But there's such a fine line to doing it enemies to lovers. There's such a nice edge you have to stay on. And with this book, it just felt like they went kind of, oh, we hate each other. Oh, now we like each other. Like, you need to have, there needs to be a little bubble, you know, it needs to kind of pop back and forth a little bit. There's such a specific way of doing it, and I'm so picky about it now, because then I'm like, oh, it's just not realistic. I mean, I'm still like, oh, that's so cute, but I can't fully appreciate that the story went how it should have, which I think is kind of funny. But the moments were really cute. Her and the sidekick were also really cute. Like, they had a nice friendship, and I'm honestly here for the love triangle. I don't think that's what's going to happen. It's a trilogy, so I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but I'm honestly here for it because they had a lot of fun, kind of banter and repartee, and it was fun seeing him kind of coaching the prince through how to, you know, flirt with her and make her trust him and stuff. But yeah, there was very cute moments. I wouldn't say it's romantic necessarily because it's not like, there's no smut or anything, but it was nice. It was like, you get the little cozy warm and fuzzies. I will say, even though I did want to say it to you guys, I wish I'd gone into it a bit more blind. It would have been nice to not know that he was the Beast. Like, if I didn't know it was a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I keep talking about Akatar and I keep comparing it to that, but I didn't know nearly as much going into that, and that was a really nice surprise to find that out. So I would have enjoyed that more, because they keep talking about this beast that's going around the place and that no one knows it's the prince, but we all know that, obviously, and we hear from the prince a little bit. But yeah, other than that, oh, it is dual perspective as well. I don't think I mentioned that. It's dual perspective. I think it's like every other chapter pretty much between her and the prince. Love that. I'm a dual perspective girly. I was so excited for that, so that really made me enjoy it more. But overall, I enjoyed this way more than I thought. It has definitely made me want to reread A Court of Thorns and Roses, but I loved it. I was immediately hooked, and it's not as good as that, but it was really interesting, and I think a lot of people who enjoyed A Court of Thorns and Roses and are kind of having the hangover from that would really enjoy this. I'd say it's probably a little bit younger audience, but it was still really enjoyable. But yeah, I think it was fun. I haven't been this drawn into a fantasy book in years, especially after reading A Deadly Education. I was kind of like, oh, you know, it's still not really hitting for me. But this book, I was drawn in. I read it in like 2 or 3 days. I think I was so excited to read it. I was bringing it with me everywhere. So that was really nice to kind of rediscover that love for fantasy. And it's a trilogy, and the minute I finished it, I was like, oh my god, I want to read the next one. So I really enjoyed that feeling. And I used to only read fantasy, and I haven't read fantasy in quite a few years. The last fantasy book I read before this video was Ninth House and Hellbent, which I just didn't like at all. No, I didn't like them at all. They were good, but it's just not my thing. I love the high fantasy. I don't really like urban fantasy or kind of dark fantasy, so this was really fun. It was kind of right up my alley, and it was nice to kind of rekindle my love for the genre again. I did also love that we left DC. I don't care about Harper's family. That sounds terrible. She's got like a sick mum. Her brother's, you know, got his own stuff going on. Don't care. I don't want to hear about it. Forget your life, Harper. We're only about the present now. But yeah, I really enjoyed this and I'm really excited to continue with the series. As I said, the end kind of has a twist or like a cliffhanger. So especially after that, I'm super excited. And yeah, overall, it's a little bit tropey, it's a little bit predictable because you kind of know that it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but I'm quite looking forward to going forward with the series and hopefully kind of get a little bit more surprised by what happens, even though we kind of know that there's a goal in mind, but it'll be interesting to see how we get there. So definitely would recommend this book. The last book I read was A Winter's Promise, which is by Crystal Dabos. This book is about this fantastical world where the world has kind of been shattered apart into these little like floating islands they call arcs, and we follow a character, Ophelia, who's from one of these arcs, who is put into an arranged marriage. She's been trying to be arranged marriaged for years and she keeps turning people down, and then they set her up one final time with a guy from another arc and there's not really any kind of cross like, you know, interaction there, so that was really interesting. And yeah, she gets whisked away by this guy to go to his arc where they're going to be engaged for a year before they get married, and it's just kind of her story of going to this new world. Yeah, this was a very interesting book. The premise was really cool. I liked the arcs and everything floating around. I really like Ophelia and her fiance Thorn. They're very fun characters, and Thorn's very much like the stoic kind of guy, and then we start to peel the layers of that onion. But we see both his aunt and Ophelia's aunts, and it's really interesting. It's also translated from French, which it might be one of the first translated books I've read, or at least the first one I've read in a long time. Which I do think made it a little bit strange. I don't know if it's just the writing style or if it's the translation, but this book was, I started this book on audiobook and I had to stop because I was so confused half the time. We kind of jump around a lot, and we'll talk about something for a good 2 pages describing the same like room, and then all of a sudden it's like we're completely somewhere else, and that is a bit jarring. And it honestly has knocked some stars down for me. I was gonna get, this probably would have been a 4.5, could have been a 5-star if it was written well, it could have been a 5-star, but I think I'm putting this at like I would say a 3.75, maybe a 4-star, if I'm being generous. The premise is a 5-star, but the writing is like a 2.5-star. 3-star. But yeah, it's a little bit confusing. While the descriptions and the characters are really, like, I love the descriptions, and it's such a vivid world. There's so many beautiful elements and different things going on, and I really like kind of all the moving pieces. It's a little bit chaotic. I don't know quite how to describe it. It reminds me quite a lot of Thumbelina, if you guys have seen that cartoon, which is a very niche reference. But it's kind of, I don't know, it has that kind of fairy tale, colourful, just element. I can't think of the word to describe it, but it was really special reading that. But the jumping around and confusing writing definitely took me out of it, and that was unfortunate. But yeah, I think it has really interesting magic systems where each arc kind of has their own magic thing going on, and then they have their own like societies and everything, so it is really interesting. And Ophelia, our main character, when she touches things, she can read the history of the object, which is really cool. And then her other power is she can walk through mirrors. So like any 2 mirrors that she's seen her reflection in and that are close enough together, she can pass right through. So that's pretty cool. She was like escaping out of places. But yeah, we watch her go with Thorn. Thorn is trying to protect her. No one's allowed to know basically that she is Thorn's fiance. And we find that out later in the book, why that is and what's going on there. But she and her aunt go through some crazy stuff. There's a lot that happens. But sometimes something happens and the next page is resolved, and that's just strange. So sometimes it's a bit weird like that, but yeah, overall it's really interesting book. We also see, I think there's a really nice commentary on kind of like hierarchy between like servants and their masters, if you will. It was a nice commentary about that, about there was just like they kind of higher beings or lords or whatever would almost be taunting these servants and the treatment of these servants, because we see Ophelia at one point, she's gone from being, you know, this like at the top level kind of, you know, I don't know what you call it, not the ruling class, but you know, that bracket, and then she has to be undercover as a servant. And it was really interesting seeing that parallel and seeing her kind of realizing that and how differently she was treated, how different the world was for her, what, you know, how quickly she was believed when something went wrong. It was really interesting, and I don't know if it was necessarily an intentional like theme of the book, but I found it really interesting to read about. Overall, I really enjoyed it. I am definitely going to continue with the series. I think there's 4 in the series. I just hope that the writing improves because it does make it a little bit difficult to read, but her and Thorn have started to kind of get along. Again, similar to A Tale So Dark and Lonely, kind of the enemies, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, I'll open up to you. So after reading a little bit of this book, I was not expecting any kind of subtle development of these things because I'd lost faith in the writing style, but I do think it will be interesting to continue and see, because right now Ophelia doesn't trust anyone. She's like in a den of wolves kind of thing, so it'll be interesting to see how their relationship progresses and how she, you know, progresses in this world. So yeah. Alright guys, that is it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. I read 3 books, 2 of which were from my physical TBR. I already have unhauled A Deadly Education. A Curse of Dark and Lonely, I'm probably going to unhaul, not because I didn't like it, but I definitely won't reread this book. But I am going to keep it until I read more of the series, because if book 2 and book 3 like blow me out of the water and it's a favourite series, which I don't think is going to happen, but I'm really enjoying it, but I can't imagine it being such a great series that I need to buy the other 2 books and own the series. But just for now, I'm going to keep this. And then A Winter's Promise, while a beautiful cover, I don't own, so no need to unhaul that. But I did start 2 different series in this, which is not great, because one of my goals this year is to finish my series and not add too many new series, but oops. Thank you guys for watching today. If you enjoyed, consider hitting like or subscribing to join me as I read through my physical TBR and unhaul as many of these books as possible. And please leave me a comment down below letting me know if you've read any of these books and what your thoughts were, or what your favourite YA fantasy series is. Thank you, and hope to see you guys in another video soon. Bye!